This is another question from the girls in seminary, Beis Rivka seminary girls, the ones that I was not able to answer during the year, and I've decided to do them here. In our days, most of the families have someone off the derech. What can we improve so that it's going to be less people? And usually why this is something that's happening more in our generation and earlier generations. So I guess it's a two-part question. What do we do to reverse this trend of kids going off the derech? And why is it happening more in our generation than in earlier generations? I want to answer the question objectively, which is something which is very difficult for people to understand. If you go back even 50 years in America, and certainly if you go back 75 years, the only people who were frum were the people who were really, really dedicated. In other words, if you're an American boy or girl, your grandfather, if he was frum, was the exception, not the rule. For sure in the 30s and 40s, and even in the 50s and 60s, most frum Yidden, their children were looking outward. What's happened over the last half a century or three-quarters of a century is that Yiddishkeit has established itself in America, and I'm going to say something which is a bit bold because I'm not qualified to say this, even in Eretz Yisrael, in the kind of way that the frum community has reached critical mass. What that means, in the frum world, we're so many that not everybody is frum because they made the decision to have Mesiras Nefesh, like Yidden made the decision to have Mesiras Nefesh 70 years ago, 75 years ago. So when you ask the question, why are some of our children going off the derech, the answer to that question is, one of the symptoms of success, when there's a lot of frum people, a lot of Hasidic people, a lot of Lubavitcher people to speak about us specifically, not everybody is going to be in the highest standard. Some of us are in the middle, and some of us are in the bottom. And some of us drift away. In other words, I think we're not realistic about the phenomena of the kids that are off the derech. It's normal. It's what happens when you have a community of Yidden. In every community of Yidden is going to be what you would call tzaddikim, benyanim, and rishayin. The tzaddikim, for the most part, they hold on to their children. The benyanim, the rishayin, I don't mean rishayin chatasham in the sinful sense, but the from people who are not that inspired, their children are more likely to be perhaps less religious than their parents. I'm not going to say necessarily getting off the derech completely. But the increase in the number of kids that are going off the derech on a simple sociological level is a commentary to the success of the rebuild of the Jewish people after the Holocaust. Not so long ago, the only people who were frum were the people who were very serious about it. Those are the grandparents of the kids growing up today. Now, many people are frum and they're cool, they're average, they're cavalier, and that's normal, it's acceptable. So it shouldn't be such a shock and a surprise that some of the kids are going off the derech. That's statement number one. Statement number two, you think kids didn't go off the derech in the old country? Read. Before the wars, there was a lot of this, of kids leaving the fold. What's different about our time is our reaction. What's different about today, and I think that Rebbe gets so much of the credit for it, even when we're talking about institutions and people and attitudes outside of Lubavitch, the Rebbe is the one who taught us to be colorblind about Jews, to love Jews unconditionally and never to turn our back on Jewish children. What's unusual about our time is that really for the first time ever maybe, if you're very frum and one of your kids fries out, you don't call him a goy and sit shiva and shut him out of your world. You embrace him. In other words, the difference in off the derech now and off the derech in the past, it's not that it didn't happen in the past. It happened, it certainly happened. But in the past, when a kid went off the derech, you turned your back on him. Today, a kid goes off the derech and we try everything in our power to embrace him and bring him back. So I think if we would be objective, and like I said before, it's very hard to be objective because it's so emotional, we're actually doing better. The percentage of kids that are going off the derech, I think if you would go back to pre-war Poland, and even Russia before the revolution, the percentages of kids who didn't stay frum, it wasn't 1 or 2. Now, the Rosh Yeshiva's children probably stayed frum, but not everybody was a Rosh Yeshiva in Russia. And not everybody was a Hasidic rebbe in Poland. There were kids who belonged to homes that were in the middle, if you will, or lower than the middle, and they had children who went off the derech. What's unusual about now is that we're actually reaching out, and we're coming to understand that there's no such thing as a bad person, there's no such thing as a bad child, there's nothing as a bad yid, and they just need different medicines. When a kid goes off the derech, sometimes it's literally no one's fault. And sometimes it is someone's fault. Sometimes there's a combination of factors. Sometimes there's huge emotional and psychological contributing factors, as many of the experts in these fields will say, that some children are so sensitive, they just can't deal with the criticism and they lash out and they run away. And we're actually being far more positive about dealing with the children who've left the fold now than we've ever been. I think that what I just said is the objective truth. It's not the way we feel, because we're living now and nobody is delighted that one of his or her children left the path, because it's incredibly painful. And to some of us, I think wrongly, but some of us there's a big shame element. But the change of attitude that's going on now in the frum world, here, and I believe it's true in Israel as well, to embrace those children and not let them leave the home is an incredibly positive step. And that's the answer to the second part of this question. What should we do? We should be very open and kind and follow the experts. There's people who've made, Avi Fishhoff has become a maven in this. There's a frum psychologist who used to live in Lakewood, now lives in Israel, whose name I don't remember. They've developed a whole approach which is very consistent with the Rebbe's approach, and it's correct and it's refreshing. It's refreshing. Historically, it's unbelievably refreshing. And you can even go as far as saying that it's a sign of Mashiach. You know, the idea that Chassidus said, "V'ahavta lecha kamocha," above all else, is being demonstrated here in an incredible way.